I still remember the exact moment I first laid eyes on that letter. It's the letter that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, my roots, and the ranch I had sworn to protect. The day the truth came crashing down like a thunderstorm over the flat plains of Wyoming. My name is Hunter Blake, and I'm about to tell you how I ended up alone, fighting to save a legacy no one else believed, and least of all my own blood. It all started on a blistering summer afternoon in the small town of Three Forks, Wyoming. The kind of place where everybody knows your name and nothing much ever changes. I grew up on a cattle ranch, Blake Ranch, surrounded by miles of dry, dusty land that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. It was a place where the air smelled like sagebrush and the sun beat down so hard. It felt like the land itself was trying to burn the dreams out of you. For years, the ranch had been my world. My father, Craig Blake, and my mother, Linda, were the kind of people who believed in the land's power. My dad taught me how to handle a horse before I could even walk. My mother, a quiet woman with a laugh that was brighter than the midday sun, showed me the simple joys of life, the beauty in a well-tended garden, the satisfaction in a hard day's work. I grew up on stories of the old ranch, of my grandfather's hands rough from years of toil, and of how this land had been in our family for generations. But everything changed when I was 10, the day my mother died. She'd been sick for months, but we thought she would pull through. That day the sky turned the color of lead, heavy with a storm that didn't come. I stood in the doorway of the small rustic farmhouse, watching as my father sat beside her bed, his face like stone. My mother's fingers squeezed mine weakly, her eyes barely open. "Hunter," she whispered, barely audible. "Promise me. Promise me you'll never let this land go." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes, but I couldn't find the strength to speak. Those were her last words. After she passed, I thought my father would break. But instead, he did something worse. He disappeared. I didn't understand at the time. He started staying out late, drinking, his eyes always clouded with something darker than grief. The man who had once taught me how to throw a lasso now avoided my gaze, never speaking, unless it was to tell me to keep my distance. The ranch, once a place of laughter and life, became a cold, hollow shell. Then, one evening when I was 12, he threw a bag at my feet and said, "We're going to live with your uncle and aunt in town. I can't take care of you anymore." I stood there, speechless, clutching that old leather bag, my mother's, the one she had sewn for me and able to make sense of it. But the reality was clear. My father was done with me. And just like that, I was sent away to live with strangers. I don't know what hurt more, the fact that he'd abandoned me, or the realization that I no longer had a place in the world I once knew. I left Blake Ranch that day with no idea if I'd ever see it again. When I arrived at my uncle's home in town, I thought I would find safety, but all I found was emptiness. The farm was now just a fading memory, an old, dilapidated shack on the outskirts of Three Forks, the barn falling apart with every season. I spent years there, always waiting for the call from my father to come back, to fix things. But that call never came. It wasn't until I was 18, after high school, that the truth came crashing down on me. That letter. It was a thick envelope, so out of place in the pile of junk mail. I didn't know who it was from, but when I opened it, my hands shook. It was a letter from my father's lawyer. He'd left the ranch to me. I can still hear my heart pounding in my chest as I read those words. "Hunter Blake," it said, "you are now the rightful owner of Blake Ranch, according to the will of Craig Blake." A ranch that had been abandoned. A ranch that had been neglected, left to rot while my father lived his life in town. The weight of it hit me like a freight train. My father, who had abandoned me, had decided, in the end, that I was the one who could save it. But he wasn't there to help. He was nowhere to be found. And so I found myself standing in the middle of a dead land, the remnants of Blake Ranch stretching out before me. I didn't want it. I didn't want the responsibility. But I couldn't walk away. Not from what it meant. Not from the promise I had made to my mother. But here's the thing. The ranch wasn't the only thing I had to fight for. There were people I didn't expect waiting in the wings. They knew about the will. They knew about my father's abandonment, and they wanted Blake Ranch for themselves. My father's new family, his wife, a woman named Vanessa, and their 2 kids had plans of their own. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place on that land was being tested. I had just stepped onto the land for the first time in years when I saw them, Vanessa, her children, and my father, standing in the yard, a look of cold expectation in their eyes. "We're here for the ranch," my father said, his voice low like a stranger, but I wasn't going to let them take it. Blake Ranch was mine, and if I had to tear it all down to rebuild it, then that's exactly what I would do. The truth was, I wasn't just fighting for the ranch, I was fighting for my mother's memory. For the land that had once been the heartbeat of our family, and I wasn't about to let anyone, even my own blood, take that from me. So here's my question to you, listeners. If you had to choose between family loyalty and protecting everything you hold dear, what would you do? Would you fight, or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments below. I didn't expect to see them standing there, my father, Vanessa, and her kids, like they had every right to be on Blake Ranch. My heart felt like a knot, tight and suffocating. I wasn't a child anymore. I had outgrown the small town and all its promises. But standing there in front of Blake Ranch, I felt like that same 12-year-old boy again, waiting for a father who would never come. My father's face was lined with years of regret, but his eyes were cold. He didn't seem like the same man who once threw me on his shoulders and told me I could do anything. He didn't seem like the man who had promised to always be there. "Hunter," my father said, almost as if he was testing the sound of my name on his tongue. "I see you've come to claim what's yours. Or is it what we all deserve?" I didn't have a response. There was no amount of anger that could cover the deep hurt in my chest. His voice, once so full of warmth, now held nothing but emptiness. Vanessa, his new wife, stepped forward. She was tall, her bleach blonde hair falling in perfect waves. She didn't look at me like I was a long-lost son returning home. No, she looked at me like I was an inconvenience, something standing in her way. "You don't know what it's like out here, Hunter," she said, her tone cold but oddly calculating. "We've built a life in town. Your father needs the money, and so do the kids. This ranch, it's too much for him to handle. He can't keep up." I stood there, trying to process her words. This ranch, this piece of land, was everything to me, to my mother, to my family. And here they were, his new family, telling me it was a burden. I could feel the ground beneath my feet trembling as though it was reacting to the words that hung in the air between us. This land wasn't just soil and cattle. It was history. My history, my mother's history. The legacy of the Blakes wasn't something you could just sell off to the highest bidder. Wasn't theirs to claim. "We'll be moving in soon," Vanessa added, her eyes narrowing, almost daring me to argue. "It's only a matter of time before we make it official." Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to stand there, letting them take this from me, not without a fight. I had spent years trying to forget Blake Ranch, trying to forget the feeling of abandonment. But now that I was here, I couldn't turn my back on it. Not now. "You're not taking this ranch?" I said, my voice low but firm. "This is mine, and I'm going to fight for it. For the family that built it, for my mother, for everything this land represents." My father flinched, his gaze wavering as if he was considering my words. But then, Vanessa put a hand on his arm, and he turned away from me, his face hardening once more. "You think you can do this alone?" he asked, his voice trembling with something between guilt and anger. "You're not ready, Hunter. You don't know the first thing about running this ranch. You don't even have the money to fix it up." The words hit harder than any punch. I didn't know how to respond, but the sting of betrayal left me speechless. He had chosen this new family over me, over his own blood, over the ranch that had once been his pride and joy. "I'll figure it out," I muttered, barely able to keep my voice steady. "I don't need your help." Vanessa laughed, a sound that echoed through the empty air like a cold wind. "You'll fail," she said, "just like your father did. This ranch is done for. Brought the only thing left is the money." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the land. It was about control. They wanted Blake Ranch because it represented something they never had. They thought they could just take it from me without even trying to understand what it meant. But as I looked around at the land that had been part of my bloodline for generations, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them destroy it. Not without a fight. Not without standing my ground. For weeks, I worked day and night, walking the ranch, inspecting the fences, the barns, the fields. Blake Ranch had been left to rot, but I wasn't going to let it stay that way. I borrowed money from the bank, hired a crew to help fix up the barns, and slowly began the long, painful process of breathing life back into this place. But every step I took was met with resistance. Vanessa, my father's new family, and even some of the old ranch hands who had once worked alongside my grandfather told me it was pointless. They said Blake Ranch was a dying cause, that no amount of hard work could save it. But they didn't understand. It wasn't about making money. It wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about holding on to the one thing that had always been constant in my life, even when everything else had fallen apart. Days turned into weeks, and still, my father never came to see what I was doing. He stayed in town, hiding behind the walls of his new life. Vanessa would call me sometimes, telling me to give it up, reminding me how much easier it would be if I just sold the ranch. And then, one day, I discovered something I wasn't prepared for. A letter. A letter from my father's lawyer, stating that he was planning to put the ranch up for sale unless I agreed to sign over the deed. That's when I realized it wasn't just the ranch they were after, it was everything that came with it. The legacy, the history, the power. But I wasn't going to let them take it, not without exposing the truth. I started digging. I reached out to old contacts, spoke to neighbors, and even hired a private investigator to look into my father's finances. What I uncovered was more than I expected. My father's debts had piled up over the years, and his new family had been living off of Blake Ranch's assets without even realizing what they were doing. The storm was about to get bigger. The days after I uncovered the truth felt like a never-ending whirlwind. My mind raced, piecing together everything I had discovered. My father's debts, his secret meetings with real estate agents, and how Vanessa had been pulling strings from the shadows. But even with all the evidence, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. My father's betrayal was one thing, but now I was up against a family that didn't care about legacy or history. They wanted profit, and the ranch was just another asset to them. The first confrontation came a week later when I walked into the kitchen of Blake Ranch to find my father sitting at the table with a stack of papers in front of him. His eyes were hollow, the same look I had seen the last time I truly spoke to him, the night he told me to leave. "Hunter, sit down," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to be in the same room as the man who had abandoned me. But I did it anyway, because there was no way I was walking away without a fight. "I've been thinking," my father continued, avoiding my gaze. "You can't keep this up. You don't have the resources. You don't have the money, the staff. The land is dying. Everything's falling apart." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "You think I don't know that?" I snapped. "You think I don't see what's happening here?" He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. "You can't do this alone, son. I've been trying to protect you from this for years." "Protect me?" I shot back. "You haven't protected anyone. You left me. You left this ranch. And now you want to sell it? To walk away from everything?" My father's hand trembled as he reached for one of the papers. "It's not like that, Hunter. I don't have a choice anymore." The word stung. He was giving up on Blake Ranch on me, as easily as he had given up on my mother. I clenched my fists, the anger boiling inside me like an uncontrollable fire. "You've already made your choice," I said, standing up. "I'm not going to let you sell this land. I'm not going to let you destroy everything my family built." I could see the guilt in his eyes, but it was drowned out by the look of resignation. There was nothing left to save, not for him. But for me it was different. "You don't understand," my father muttered. "You don't know what it's like to be at the end of your rope." "I do," I said, my voice steady now, but my heart pounding. "I've been there. But this ranch is everything. It's all I have left. And I won't let you take it away." He didn't say anything more. He didn't fight me. He didn't try to stop me. I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for the land, I was fighting for the person I used to think he was. The man who taught me how to ride, how to fix fences, how to stand tall when the world was crumbling around me. That man was gone. I had to accept that. But I would carry on the legacy, my mother's legacy, my grandfather's. That night, I went out to the fields, to the farthest corner of Blake Ranch, where the land met the distant hills. The stars above seemed brighter than usual, as if the universe itself was watching, waiting. I had no plan, no strategy. It's just the knowledge that I couldn't let the ranch slip away without a fight. The next morning I called a meeting with the rest of the ranch hands. They'd been quiet for too long, caught between loyalty to my father and their own fears about the future. But they had worked on this land for years, some of them for decades. I needed them on my side. When I stepped into the barn where they were gathered, they all turned to me, eyes full of suspicion, doubt, and, if I was being honest, hope. They'd seen what I was trying to do. They knew what was at stake. Hunter Bill, the oldest ranch hand, spoke first. You're fighting a battle you can't win. This ranch is dead. The cattle's sick, the soil's worn out, we're just too far behind. I didn't want to hear it. Not from Bill, not from anyone. But I had to stay calm. I couldn't afford to show weakness now. I know the challenges we face, I said, my voice clear, steady. But we're not done yet. I've been looking into new methods. We can revitalize the soil, improve the cattle's health, and start making this ranch profitable again. We're not giving up, not while I'm here. There was a long silence, but finally Tom, one of the younger hands, spoke up. I'm with you, Hunter. You think we can save it? I'll help. Bill gave a tired nod, and slowly the others joined in. They weren't all convinced, but they were willing to give me a chance. They had nowhere else to go, and neither did I. But just as the meeting ended, Vanessa showed up, as if she had been waiting for the right moment to make her move. You're wasting your time, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. You can't save Blake Ranch, Hunter. Not with these old methods. Not with these people. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I turned to the ranch hands, their eyes glued to me, waiting for the next move. We're not giving up, I repeated, my voice stronger than I'd ever felt before. This is our land, our home, and we will fight for it. Vanessa scowled but didn't say anything else. She knew it was no use. I spent the next few weeks getting to work. I invested every last dime I had into bringing the ranch back to life. I brought in specialists to test the soil, implement new irrigation systems, and research ways to keep the cattle healthy. It wasn't easy, but each small success, each piece of this ranch slowly coming back to life, felt like a victory. But with every step forward, Vanessa was there, always watching, always waiting for a crack in the foundation. I knew she was plotting something. I didn't trust her. Then, one evening, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. As I walked through the barn, I caught Vanessa on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear everything, but I could make out a few words. It's time, she said. We can't let him keep this up. He's getting too close. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. What was she planning? Was she working with someone? Who was she speaking to? I stayed hidden in the shadows, listening, but she hung up before I could learn more. But one thing was clear. This fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I want to hear from you, listeners. If you were in Hunter's shoes, would you trust the people around you to help save your family's legacy? Or would you go it alone? Would you take the risk of betrayal again? Or would you keep your cards close to your chest? Let me know what you think in the comments below. The next few weeks felt like a blur. I worked day and night, the days blending into one long stretch of sweat, dust, and endless decisions. The ranch was starting to show signs of life, but it wasn't enough to silence the doubts, both in the back of my mind and in the whispers that seemed to follow me. The land needed more than just hard work. It needed time, and I had none of it left. The debts my father had accrued loomed over us like a shadow, and Vanessa's presence only made the air thicker with tension. She didn't trust me. She never had. Every time I turned around, I found her watching me, her eyes sharp, calculating, had no illusions. She wasn't just after the ranch. She was after control. And for the first time since my father left, I began to understand how far she was willing to go to get it. One afternoon, I was out in the fields, checking the new irrigation system we had installed when I saw them. Vanessa, her children, and a man I didn't recognize, standing by the barn. My heart sank. I knew they were up to something, but this was different. There was a certain tension in the air, a feeling that something irreversible was about to happen. I approached them slowly, my boots crunching in the gravel. Kana saw me coming and smiled, though it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives you when they think they've already won. Hunter, she said, her voice almost sweet, though her eyes held something darker. We've been talking. The man beside her was tall, his suit expensive, looking he didn't belong here. He was too clean, too polished for the ranch life. He extended his hand toward me, a businesslike gesture. "This is Greg," Vanessa introduced, her smile never fading. "He's with a real estate investment firm. They're interested in Blake Ranch." I couldn't stop the chill that ran down my spine. I'd already known something like this was coming. The signs were there. The way she spoke about the ranch, the way her children acted like they owned the place, it all pointed to this. "I'm not selling," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. My voice was steady, but my mind was racing, trying to piece together what was happening. Greg raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "We're not asking you to sell," he said, his tone polite but laced with something more calculating. "We're offering you an opportunity, a chance to partner with us, to turn this place around." I didn't like the way he said it. There was a coldness to his words, as if the land was just another investment, a way to make money, not a legacy, not a home. "We can help you bring the ranch into the 21st century, Greg continued, ignoring my resistance. "We can offer you the funding, the resources to modernize, streamline operations. You won't have to struggle anymore." My pulse quickened, and my fists clenched. I wasn't stupid. I could see what this was. They were trying to buy me out, trying to use my desperation to get what they wanted. They didn't care about the land. They didn't care about the history of Blake Ranch. They just wanted to strip it down and sell it off piece by piece. "You don't understand," I said, stepping forward, my voice hardening. "This place isn't just land. It's my family's history. My mother's memory is here. You think you can just buy your way in and take it?" Greg's smile never wavered. He wasn't threatened. "It's a business, Hunter. You're not going to win this fight alone. The truth is you need help. You don't have the connections, the experience. All we're offering is a way forward." I glared at him, the anger bubbling up in me like molten lava. "I don't need your help. I don't need anyone who thinks this place is just a commodity. You're not getting it. You'll never get it." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You don't have a choice, Hunter. You're in over your head. You're not even close to turning this around. You're bleeding money." Her words stung more than they should have. I knew it was true. I knew that if things didn't change, I'd lose everything. But that didn't mean I was going to let them take it from me. Not like this. "Not giving up," I said through gritted teeth. "I'm not selling." For a moment, the air between us felt thick, heavy with unspoken tension. Greg looked at Vanessa, then back at me, as if he were making a mental calculation. "Fine," he said, his voice turning colder, more businesslike. "But don't say we didn't offer you a way out." With that, they turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the dust. My heart was racing, but I knew I couldn't back down. I had made a promise to my mother, to my grandparents, to this land. I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers just because they had money and connections. They didn't understand. They didn't understand what it meant to grow up on this land, to know it like the back of your hand, to feel it in your bones. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the air turned cool, I sat on the porch, staring out over the ranch. It was quieter now, the wind rustling through the trees. Blake Ranch felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. I thought about what Greg had said about needing help. It was true, in a way. I couldn't do it alone. But I wouldn't let them control me. I wouldn't let them strip away everything that made this place mine. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, seeing a message from Bill, one of the old ranch hands. It was a simple text. "Hunter, you need to come to the barn. Something's going down." My stomach dropped. What now? I grabbed my jacket and ran out the door, heading toward the barn. The ranch was quiet. Too quiet. My mind raced with possibilities. What had Bill meant? What was happening now? When I reached the barn, I found Bill standing by the back door, looking at something in the distance. His face was tense, his eyes narrowed. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice low. Bill nodded toward the open field. "Look," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. There, in the distance, I saw a figure walking across the field. A man with a heavy-set build. It wasn't one of the usual workers, and as the man drew closer, I realized who it was. It was Greg. But he wasn't alone. Behind him was a group of men I didn't recognize, strangers, carrying tools and equipment. "They're making their move," Bill said, his voice grim. Didn't hesitate. I turned and ran toward the field, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't going to let them take it without a fight. Not after everything we'd been through. I ran toward the field, my boots kicking up dust with each step. My heart was pounding, blood rushing in my ears. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. I could feel it, the weight of every single moment leading to this one. This was it. This was the moment I had to stand tall, no matter the cost. As I reached the edge of the field, I slowed to a stop, my breath coming fast and hard. I saw them clearly now, Greg and the group of men, their steps slow but deliberate, crossing the vast open land like they owned it. Greg spotted me first, and a smirk spread across his face. He raised his hand, signaling for the others to stop. They obeyed, standing there like statues in the fading light. "You're quick on your feet," Greg called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But you're too late, Hunter." I clenched my jaw and stepped forward, refusing to let him see my hesitation. I was standing on the very land that had been passed down through generations, the blood of my ancestors running through every blade of grass. I wasn't going to let him take it without a fight. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice firm, though I could feel the anger boiling beneath the surface. "What are you doing?" Greg's smirk didn't waver. "You're still holding on to something that's long gone. This place is done, Hunter. Can't save it. You can't fix it. Wait, it's over." His words cut deep, and for a second, doubt crept in. What if he was right? What if I couldn't fix the ranch? But then I remembered my mother's smile, my father's hands rough from years of work, the feeling of the earth beneath my feet. I wasn't just fighting for a piece of land, I was fighting for my family, for everything we'd built. "I'll never give up," I said, my voice steady. "This ranch is my blood, and I'll protect it with everything I have." Greg laughed, shaking his head like he was humoring me. "Can't protect it from me, Hunter. Can't protect it from the truth." I didn't understand what he meant, but I wasn't about to stand there and listen to his taunts. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. "You don't get it?" I said, my voice low. "This ranch isn't yours to take." But as I took that step, something in the air shifted. I couldn't explain it at first. It was a feeling, something that gripped my chest and made my skin prickle with unease. And then I saw it, something moving in the distance, a black figure against the twilight sky. My heart skipped a beat. It was my father. He stood there in the middle of the field, looking like a ghost. His face was drawn and hollow, his clothes disheveled. I hadn't seen him in weeks, and now here he was, standing in the very place I had spent years trying to save. But his presence felt wrong, like he didn't belong here anymore. "What is this?" I asked, stepping back, my heart racing. "What's going on?" Greg, seeing the shift in my attention, turned and raised his eyebrows. "Looks like someone finally came to help you, huh?" But as my father started walking toward us, I realized something wasn't right. His steps were slow, unsteady, and his eyes, they weren't looking at me. He was looking at the ground, as if he couldn't see anything at all. "Dad," I called out, my voice trembling, but the words caught in my throat. He didn't respond. He just kept walking, his gaze fixed on the dirt beneath his feet. As he neared Greg and the men, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Then, without warning, my father stopped. He stood there as if lost, his eyes vacant, before he finally looked up directly at Greg. I'm sorry, Hunter," my father said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've made a deal." The words hit me like a slap to the face. My father, my own flesh and blood, had made a deal with the enemy. He had sided with the very people trying to destroy everything we'd fought for. I couldn't breathe. My father, the man who had once told me I was the future of Blake Ranch, had given up on everything. And now, here he was, handing it all away without a second thought. Greg smiled, his eyes gleaming with victory. "See, Hunter, your father understands. This is the way forward. No more struggle, no more pain, just money." My stomach churned, and I turned to face my father, my voice breaking. "You sold us out? You sold this land for what?" "For money?" But my father didn't answer. He just stood there, his head hanging low, as if the weight of everything he'd done had finally crushed him. In that moment, I realized something. Greg wasn't just after Blake Ranch, he was after my father's soul. And he had it. A rage like I'd never felt before surged through me. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about the money or the promises. I cared about the truth. I cared about standing tall for my family, for my mother, for the land that meant everything to me. I turned back to Greg, my eyes locked onto his with a fierce determination. You think you can just waltz in here and take everything? I shouted. You're wrong. Oh, this is my family's land and I won't let you destroy it. Greg didn't flinch. Instead, he looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You don't have the power to stop me. You never did. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My father had already made his choice, but I still had a choice to make. I could walk away just like he had. I could leave and let them tear down everything I loved. But I wasn't going to do that. Not now. Not when I was so close to saving it all. I turned on my heel and ran back to the barn. I had no time to waste. I needed to act fast. If I was going to fight for Blake Ranch, I couldn't do it alone anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed Bill's number, my hands shaking as I held the device to my ear. Bill, it's time, I said, my voice firm. We're not backing down. Bill's voice crackled through the line. You sure about this, Hunter? We're up against more than just money. We're up against power. I don't care, I said, my voice steady now. This ranch is my blood. I'm not going to let them take it. I hung up the phone and stood there in the barn, my mind racing. I could hear my father's voice in my head, echoing the words he had said earlier. I've made a deal, but that deal wasn't just his to make. This ranch was mine to protect, mine to save. I wasn't going to let them strip it away, not when I still had breath in my lungs. I gathered what little I had left in me, strength, determination, and the will to fight, and stormed out of the barn, heading straight for the field. The sun had dipped behind the hills, casting everything in a soft purple glow, but I wasn't stopping. Not now. Bill arrived a few minutes later, his truck kicking up dust as it screeched to a halt in front of me. His weathered face was full of determination, but there was a glint in his eyes, a shared understanding that this was no longer about just the ranch. It was about everything. Everything I had worked for. You ready? He asked, his voice low but firm. I nodded. We don't have much time. I need to get to the bank and stop the sale before it's too late. Bill raised an eyebrow. You sure about this? If they have a contract, there's no turning back. I don't care, I said. They're not taking it. They're not taking Blake Ranch. We worked quickly, moving under the cover of the growing night. Bill drove, while I worked the phone, contacting anyone I could think of. Neighbors, old ranch hands, people who had worked on the land, people who remembered what Blake Ranch meant. If we were going to stop the sale, I needed everyone. Everyone who believed in what this place stood for. As we pulled up to the local bank, my heart raced. The lights inside were dim, but there was no one on the street. We were running out of time. I could feel the weight of it, heavy on my shoulders. This was the moment. Bill stayed by the truck, keeping a lookout, while I stormed inside. I pushed through the door with urgency, my boots clanging on the tile as I made my way to the front desk. The teller looked up, surprised to see me. Can I help you? I need to see the manager, I said, not bothering to explain. The urgency in my voice was enough. Moments later, a woman walked out from the back office. She looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place her. Her name tag read Grace. What's going on, Hunter? She asked, crossing her arms as she eyed me. What's this about? Blake Ranch, I said, not wasting time. I need to stop the sale. The contract hit's not valid. I need you to help me. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? You've already processed the paperwork. Then you need to stop, I pressed. This is my family's land, my mother's, my grandfather's, my father. He's made a mistake, and I need you to help me fix it. Grace hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking to the papers on her desk. But something in my eyes must have convinced her. Without saying another word, she picked up the phone and dialed. Minutes later, I was in her office, watching as she spoke to someone on the other end of the line. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension in her tone. She was stalling. I could feel it. Mr. Blake, she said, her eyes focused on me. I'm going to need you to come down here, now. I nodded, and we didn't waste another second. I knew who she was talking to. Greg, Vanessa, they were closing in. I couldn't let them win. Back at the ranch, I could see the lights in the distance. The figures of Greg and his men were walking toward the barn, confident they had already won. But they didn't know what was coming. They didn't know the fight wasn't over yet. As I made my way back to the truck, Bill looked up, a look of concern crossing his face. What now? They're not leaving with the ranch, I said. my voice steady, but my heart pounding in my chest. We need to get to the courthouse. Bill didn't ask any questions. He knew what this meant. We didn't have much time, and I wasn't about to let them take everything I loved. We sped toward the courthouse, where I knew I'd find the final piece of this puzzle: the deed, the ownership, and the chance to stop them from taking what wasn't theirs. When we arrived, the building was nearly empty, save for a couple of night guards who barely looked up as we stormed inside. I made my way to the records department, where I found the clerk I needed. "I need to see the documents on Blake Ranch," I said, my voice commanding. The clerk, a man in his late 40s, looked at me with an uncertain frown. "You sure? Those documents aren't open to just anyone. I'm the owner," I said, holding up the legal documents I had gotten earlier. "The deed to Blake Ranch. I need to stop the sale. It's not valid. My father signed it under duress." The man took a deep breath, glancing at the paperwork. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the back office. I waited, every second, feeling like an eternity. Minutes later, he returned, shaking his head. "There's nothing I can do. The paperwork's already been processed. It's in the system." His voice trailed off as he looked down at the deed again. Then, something shifted in his face. "Wait a second. This is not your father's signature." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "What?" The clerk held up the documents. "It's this signature. It's a forgery. This isn't your father's handwriting." I couldn't believe it. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. This was it. This was the proof I needed. So now I ask you, listeners, if you found out that your father had signed away your legacy under duress, would you still try to rebuild what was taken, or would you walk away from the fight? What would you do if the very foundation of your world was built on lies? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.